Can Bob Baffert win the Preakness for a record 9th time with Rodriguez? Stick around and find out. Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and welcome to another Preakness Stakes Contender Spotlight Series. This one is on Bob Baffert's Rodriguez. Now, before we get to this very intriguing runner who won the Wood Memorial, I want to remind you to press that like button and subscribe to NYRA Bets YouTube today. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, just notifies you when new videos drop on the channel, whether those are race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, or spotlight series like this one, specialty programs, and so much more. So press that like and subscribe button today. Now, obviously, the big news over the last 24, 48 hours that you might have seen is that Sovereignty, the winner of the Kentucky Derby, is out of the Preakness, skipping and going to be pointing toward the Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. As a result, the Preakness feels much more wide open. And obviously, the big question is, can Bob Baffert, who has won this race 8 times before, win it yet again with Rodriguez? And I think it's really intriguing to see, because the reality is that Rodriguez reminds me a great deal of a horse like National Treasure from a couple of years ago that Baffert had won. Now, remember, Baffert won a lot of these Preaknesses with horses that also won the Kentucky Derby. But National Treasure is an intriguing horse, and I think an interesting comparison as well, in that National Treasure was a horse that was not allowed to run in the Kentucky Derby because of Baffert's ongoing suspension at the time from Churchill Downs. He comes to the Preakness instead and wins that race. Rodriguez qualifies for the Kentucky Derby, ships to Churchill Downs, is working at Churchill Downs, and then is scratched by Baffert from the race because of a minor foot bruise. Now, here's an important distinction. Because Baffert scratched the horse and removed the horse from the race, he is eligible to run 2 weeks later. If he had been a vet scratch, there would have been certain protocols put in place that would have likely prevented him from running 2 weeks later at Pimlico. So that is an important distinction. If people wonder, why is it that this horse is able to run, but a horse that is a vet scratch might not be able to run? That's the reason. The trainer removed the horse from the race as opposed to the veterinary crew. So an important distinction to make, but now Rodriguez shows up particularly fresh to the Preakness Stakes, having last run in the Wood Memorial up here at Aqueduct and getting the win. But listen, let's dive into this horse who we did a spotlight series on leading up to the Kentucky Derby, but I think he's actually even more intriguing in the Preakness, and he's got a much better chance, I think. Listen, his big defining victory is in that Wood Memorial. You'll see a couple of second place finish in the Robert B. Lewis, a third in the San Felipe. But let's talk about the profile of the horse. One of the things that really struck me when listening to Bob Baffert talk to the media a couple of weeks ago at Churchill Downs was he was very confident that this horse would be able to get the distance. And he's sired by Authentic. Authentic, of course, won the Kentucky Derby, won the Breeders' Cup Classic, going 1.25 miles. But he's also sired by Authentic, that is, Into Mischief. Now, we've had a lot of discussions about Into Mischief. Why? Because Sovereignty, who won the Kentucky Derby, is also sired by Into Mischief. But a horse like Citizen Bull, who was also in the race, is also sired by Into Mischief. Now, the reason I bring those two up is a lot of it matters because of who you have underneath, the dam side pedigree. In the case of Sovereignty, the dam side pedigree is influenced by Bernardini, who's a fantastic influence on Into Mischief. Into Mischief on his own is not going to get you 1.25 miles. He'll get you a mile. And then it's really up to the dam side influence to kind of give you that additional distance. And in the case of Sovereignty, you have phenomenal distance pedigree underneath. Now, in the case of Citizen Bull, you had Distorted Humor, which is more of a sprint pedigree. So it makes sense that Citizen Bull faded in the Kentucky Derby well back, I believe, to 15th. Now, you look at Rodriguez, sired by Authentic. So again, where's the influence coming underneath? Kayela, much more of a sprint influence in Cherokee Run. So interesting that Baffert has this opinion on Rodriguez in that he seems to think he can do the distance. I will say, when he was up here at Aqueduct and winning the Wood Memorial, he certainly looked like he could keep going another half furlong, which is the additional distance for the Preakness. Like I said, notable efforts. Winning that Wood Memorial was a big deal. I think there are some excuses for why he did not do better in the Robert B. Lewis and the San Felipe, and I think that becomes obvious when you look at his running lines. So here they are, and there's a couple of things that really stand out. The two are obviously the triple-digit Beyer speed figures, the 100 breaking his maiden and the 101 in the Wood Memorial. The two things those races have in common, gate to wire. You see the ones from the beginning to the end. And that is the key with Rodriguez, is he needs to be on the lead. And so that's pretty obvious. He does not rate very effectively. So when he ran his maiden and he won going gate to wire, 100 buyer speed figure. He comes up here to Aqueduct and again gets a relatively easy trip. Admittedly, there are some horses that should have gone that day that did not go. And it was really kind of Captain Cook providing some nominal pressure throughout those early fractions, which were legitimate, but certainly not overwhelming 47-2, 111-1 to allow Rodriguez to be able to kind of get a pretty easy lead, win by 3.5 lengths, really was kind of getting geared down a little bit there towards the end. Horse like Grande was making up a little bit of ground, but again, Rodriguez was not being asked for much more towards the finish line and certainly looked like he could keep running for quite a while. So the other two races, though, the Robert B. Lewis and the San Felipe, he was intentionally rated off the pace. And so he sat behind Citizen Bull in the Robert B. Lewis, who was Baffert's champion 2-year-old and kind of top Derby contender. And then in the San Felipe, he was intentionally rated off the pace of Barnes, who was a very highly thought of prospect in the Baffert barn. And in both of those races, because he didn't really get the trip that is best for him, he didn't end up seeing him run particularly well. Then he comes to the Wood Memorial and he's able to run his race. And son of a gun, if he doesn't earn another 101 buyer speed figure. Those buyer speed figures are significant because they're really close to what journalism ran. Journalism's run a 102 the last 2 times out in both the Santa Anita Derby as well as in the Kentucky Derby. You have a horse like Clever Again that ran a 101 in the Hot Spring Stakes, but that was going a mile. And outside of that, you don't really see a lot of triple-digit buyer speed figures for this 3-year-old group. So Rodriguez, by having 2 of them, really does stand out. He is going to be one of the main speed horses in the race. And in this way, he is also like National Treasure. National Treasure, who won this race 2 years ago, was a horse that had a little bit of a different profile in that he was probably a little bit more well thought of earlier on in his career. You know, he ran the Breeders' Cup Juvenile against Forte, and you know, he had run some big races. And, you know, he ends up kind of running second and third a lot, but, you know, close up. And they put him on the lead in the Preakness. And, you know, even to this day, National Treasure, you know, until he retired, National Treasure tended to be a different horse when he was up on the lead. And they got him up on the lead that day in the Preakness, and he took him gate to wire, and he won. And he held off Blazing Sevens. So I think Rodriguez is very similar in that when you get him up on the lead, he's just a different type of animal, and he's going to run a lot better. And the question is, can he get to the lead? Because you do have a horse like Clever Again for Steve Asmussen, who is a very fast horse. Okay, you have a horse like Caldera for D. Wayne Lucas, who's also a pretty fast horse as well. I think Rodriguez is probably faster, but Caldera is no slouch and can absolutely run. And then you have a horse like River Thames, who's probably not faster than Rodriguez, but will prefer to track the pace and sit kind of second or third. So there are some horses that will want to be very forwardly placed in this race. Now, all of that being said, Pimlico is the right type of track for Rodriguez. It really fits the profile. And it's not about the tight turns of Pimlico, which is kind of a myth. It's not kind of, it is a myth. But it's more about the fact that really Pimlico soups up their track on big days. You know, their big days tend to really favor front end speed. It's a hard track for horses to make up a lot of ground on, which is one of the reasons I was always skeptical about Sovereignty's chances in the second leg of the Triple Crown. I actually like his chances a lot in the Belmont, not even after he decided to skip, but even before that. But Rodriguez is going to have the benefit of the track in all likelihood. So if he's able to get up there on the front end, and it depends on obviously where he draws and how he breaks, but if he's able to get up there on the front end with Mike Smith, who might be getting up there in years, but Mike Smith knows how to get a horse up on the lead. There's no 2 ways about that. And if Mike's able to get him up there on the front end and take him gate to wire, yeah, there's a really good chance he wins this race. And so Rodriguez is going to be an interesting price because it's really going to depend on if journalism draws into the race and decides to come. If journalism comes, he's going to be your overwhelming favorite, and it's going to allow you to get much better odds on a horse like Rodriguez, who I think, again, has faced journalism before and lost by 11 1/4 lengths. But again, that was when he was not doing his thing up on the front end. So I think Rodriguez could be outstanding value in this particular case. And I think he's a horse, you know, again, when I say value, what I'm referring to is if a horse like journalism comes, if a horse like Sandman even decides to come, because that horse is going to get a lot of public support. Rodriguez would seem to be in the next group, though, with Clever Again, with River Thames, with Gosker. You know, would certainly be a higher caliber horse, you know, compared to Gosker in particular. But Rodriguez is probably going to be your second, maybe your third choice but he's got the right running style for this race. And like I said, second or third choice if Journalism or Sandman kind of decide to come. So I think Rodriguez stands a big chance in this race. He's got to get up front. And if he's able to do that and he's able to secure relatively easy fractions, he's going to be a really tough horse to pass because, like I said, when I watched him up here at Aqueduct, nobody was getting close to him. Now, you could question the caliber of that field, but if Journalism isn't running and there's still a little bit of a question mark there, and we'll have to wait and see, then you can question the caliber of the field at the Preakness as well and whether or not anybody's good enough coming from off the pace. Maybe River Thames, but again, that's some McLean's music going a mile and 3/16. We'll see. Maybe a horse, like a Clever again, really freaks and is able to get out up on the front end ahead of him. That's possible. Maybe Gosker takes a big step forward. I mean, he would certainly have the right running style to potentially beat Rodriguez. But listen, if Rodriguez, doesn't really have Journalism to worry about, it's going to be hard to beat him in this race. He's going to be a top contender, and the trainer certainly knows how to win at Pimlico. All right, well, that'll do it for this Preakness Stakes Spotlight Series on Rodriguez. I think a very live runner, a horse that's going to be hard to beat, and it's going to be interesting to see where he draws. I actually would like him to draw maybe a little more inside and just get that inside speed, just like he did in the Wood Memorial. You almost kind of have to ask the question when you're on inside, as opposed to drawing outside, and then you have to cross and clear everybody. Really, when you're on the inside with speed, sometimes you can really get that momentum and force everybody else then wide as a result, because I don't think anybody's going to be clearing Rodriguez. And so again, you don't have to maybe exert quite as much to clear everybody if you're on the inside, and you kind of force them wide as a result. And again, if Mike Smith pulls a Martin Garcia and just kind of forces everybody out 5 wide going down the home stretch, we'll have to obviously wait and see how that all plays out. But listen, it's going to be a fun race no matter who's in it, but Rodriguez certainly is a horse that provides a lot of intriguing to play, certainly, and maybe even single, depending on how the race ends up coming up. All right, well, that'll do it for me on this Spotlight Series. I want to remind you to press that like and subscribe button today. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.